Good morning, everybody. How y'all doing this morning? Let's talk about the Nolan Wells thing for a second. I was on a live last night, and this is the honest to God's truth, and I'm going to even post in the hashtags where you can go find and listen to it. So here's what happened. They killed Nolan Wells on the boat. They covered him up with the life jackets. They all knew he was on the boat. They just laid him on the back of the boat and got towed in part of the way. Then they got their boat running and they got on in. And when they got in, they couldn't figure out where they were going to put him or what they were going to do. So they dropped everybody off. Then they went back out to the island that the GPS doesn't show, but they did because they disconnected it. Okay? And none of them had their phones with them when they went back. So there wasn't any trace of them going back. And they dumped the body. They came back, took the boat out of the water, then went over there at 3 a.m. and washed the boat, thinking washing the boat would get all the DNA and everything off the boat. That's what they did. Now I'm telling you, the stories are unbelievable at this point. You can't make this up. First, it was about leaving the island. Well, that one blew up. Found out 2 people were at the island, saw him. Then the Coast Guard, Coast Guard call, CETO call. Nolan, oh my God, Nolan, get up. They heard that. Can't make it up. Not making it up. Then there was the phone, Warren's phone. Now, this. And also, last night, we have a bunch of body experts of their body movements in their interviews that they were not telling the truth. That they're body experts, they move their eyes like that or move like that or, they looked up or, something. But I'm telling you, the authorities should use these TikTok creators to solve this case. They are some of the smartest people you will ever encounter. They were talking about the justice system being unfair. I asked them what the 3 legislative bodies of justice were in the United States. They said, well, it's the state, the local, and the sheriff. Okay? It's amazing when you ask a simple question, you can't even get an answer. They don't know the port side from the starboard side on a boat, but yet they know all about boating. It's absolutely amazing, people. And if you will sit back and listen to some of these other lives, I'm going to post the live on my link if you want to listen to a rational discussion of the best live on TikTok. I'm going to post it. Go over there and listen to it. I'm afraid if I say it, I may say it wrong. That's my body language right there. So anyway, y'all have a good day.
Uh-oh. What do we have here, y'all? What do we owe? That's Nolan right there, y'all. That's Nolan right there. I'm trying to do it slow for y'all. This one of them breeze by. You know how they do the little boomerang thing on Instagram and all. It's one of those. Y'all, I woke up to a lot this morning. We got a lot of lies being disproved. And we got more video footage, y'all. And I want y'all to let me know. Do y'all think this is real? Or do y'all think this is AI? I don't think it's AI at all. Because when y'all see this, y'all ain't gonna see no 6 fingers and 2 arms and all of that. Everything looks in line. Before we get into it, y'all make sure y'all hit that hype button. Make sure you like the video. And make sure, for those that's in the back, stuck in their ways, you never hit no buttons, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Check this out, y'all.
Yes, sister, friend, I will share a longer version. I'm going to add it to this one. But the purpose of this video, I couldn't even sleep last night because I was trying to put A, B, C together. So this picture, the video, excuse me, on June the 23rd helps in a lot of ways because Warren stated in all of the videos in his interviews that they were a tight-knit group of people. And he also said that there were around 20 to 30 people scattered in those 3 or 4 different boats that they had taken, correct? Okay, so
we seeing this one?
The trip on June the 23rd, per Warren, are a tight-knit group of people, would be the same people that we saw inside this picture.
Uh-oh. What do we have here, y'all? What do we owe? That's Nolan right there, y'all. That's Nolan right there. I'm trying to do it slow for y'all. This one of them breeze by. You know how they do the little boomerang thing on Instagram and all. It's one of those. Y'all see that? So I want y'all to pay attention to see everybody. I'm gonna see who that is in the front. Y'all see this? That's Nolan. That is Nolan. I'm trying to see who it. So you got all these damn people ain't saying nothing. This is wild. 1, 2, 3. There's somebody right here in the cut. There's somebody right here. Somebody right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And there's somebody at the front of a driver. 5, 6, 7. Justice for Nolan, man. Let's get it, y'all. Look, 2 right there. Hold on.
So
2
that
up
is
there.
where I'm.
2 up there.
So that is.
Look, 2 up there. Just enjoying the breeze and shit. That's sad, man. Sad, man.
So that is where I'm going with the video because Warren, again, said that they were a tight-knit group of friends. Like, there's no outsiders in their circle. And so the same people that are on that video on June the 23rd are the same people that are in that still image on Horns Island, allegedly Horns Island, that we see here.
So for those that don't get what she was saying, because I was running my mouth, what she was insinuating is that being as though that they've been implying so much that they're a tight-knit group, tight-knit group, tight-knit group. She showed a video of the tight-knit group with each other. Why the hell the tight-knit group ain't coming out saying nothing? You're tight-knit. Why would Nolan Wells want to go off and venture by himself? And then you had one of the young men say, Nolan always was trying to be with us. Nolan always trying to be on a boat.
If 3 black people took a white man on a boat expedition and didn't return with him, the president would be making a speech right now. There is a double standard of justice and coverage. But here's why Kevin discusses in a great post about the national news's silence on Nolan Wells. If you Google Nolan Wells New York Times, there is no article. Nolan Wells MSNBC, nope, they haven't written one. By CNN, all that they have is a TikTok-style video, no written article. And the Washington Post finally has an article only after his body was found. Here's why Kevin references a study that found while black people make up roughly 35% of missing persons cases in the FBI database at the time of the study, they received only 7 to 11% of media coverage. This is why local news outlets like the Mississippi Free Press that's been reporting on this are so important, and why it's so dangerous that news has been consolidating into these big billionaire-owned corporations, forcing lots of local outlets recently to keep shutting down. You can find the GoFundMe of Nolan's family at the Schmink and My Schmio. And one of the most important things is that families will tell you what they need. Sometimes that's privacy, spreading the word, financial support. We don't want to assume, we want to let them tell us how to help. His mother's request a couple days ago was if you have any pictures or videos that were taken on the northwest tip of Horn Island on July 4th to reach out to her. This is her Threads account, and you can provide evidence to help their investigation.
This is why we must be our own news. We cannot look for these people to save us, y'all. We cannot look to these people to push out our message and try to get justice for us. They are all connected, y'all. This is why I be telling us, look, we got to do this together, y'all.
How does young men who we don't really have any evidence that committed a crime, how do they get painted as criminals? How do they get painted as being responsible for the death of a person that was considered their friend?
By putting you on the case. For real, that's like someone accused of SA and then turning Republican. It's pretty much an admission of guilt. For real, why are you even on the case? You're not a cop anymore, Anthony Anderson, who would never be in Blackish. You asked, how do they get painted as criminals? How do you paint them innocent? All you are doing is defending those kids. You're interviewing them. You're pretty much their spokesperson. And just like with Sonia Massey, George Floyd, and everyone else, you're lying about this case. You said those kids took polygraph tests. Now you were checked and proven wrong by Nancy Grace. But here's her interviewing the kid's lawyer.
Have your clients taken polygraphs?
Nancy, my clients have not taken a polygraph test.
Now this guy here is a boy's lawyer. His name is Tyler Cox. Of course it's Tyler Cox. Now what does this lawyer want you to see? Advertisement for his business, Call Cox, and a bottle. The only 2 things he's advertising, his business and another business. Now if you zoom in, you'll clearly see it's a bottle of Verdict bourbon. And he's been doing interviews all over, and he always has that bottle of bourbon behind him. Now, here's Brandon Tatum's podcast. What do you see? I see Verdict bourbon, right? Verdict bourbon is owned by Brandon Tatum. What a coincidence! So you don't think it's a conflict of interest for someone to market your product, who is also the lawyer of the white boys that you are protecting and painting innocent? Now I'm positive Brandon Tatum's gonna have a weak ass excuse. Yeah, when I met him, I gave him a bottle because Verdict, he's a lawyer, Verdict, you know. But if the lawyer had any brains at all, he would see how this would look. By the way, you're defending those kids, Brandon. I wouldn't be surprised if they were drinking Verdict bourbon on the boat. Please threaten to sue me again, Brandon. Let's take this shit to discovery.
I just received this message in my inbox and it says, I was present during the events involving Nolan. Nolan was on the island with a girl while he had his phone. He later returned to his friends and they all sailed back to shore. After that, his phone's location moved back and forth before ending up at Evan's house. As around 1 a.m., Nolan had asked for his phone back after he had been taken. Physical altercation followed. He said they observed Nolan gasping for air and coughing up blood. On July the 5th, search teams did not find Nolan. But based on the timeline and the information available to him, I believe that his body was moved sometime late in the evening of July the 5th or during early hours of July the 6th. They are saying that's exactly why there was nothing found in the initial search for Nolan. They believe that Nolan was unalive between July 5th and or either July the 6th. Those final conclusions are their personal beliefs based on them being a witness and knowing. Unfortunately, they weren't on the island to witness or give direct times of the dumping of his body. unfortunately being covered up. One of the boys' mom, who is a judge, went to her house, and that's where the boat was cleaned because she knows what to use to clear evidence because she is a judge. This is truly, now all of this is alleged, y'all. It's just,
I want y'all to pay close attention to this next video because he's going to expound on something that I've been meaning to talk about, and it's this moving on up mindset that we have in the black community. When we get a bunch of money or we elevate in life, we feel as though we gotta move and be amongst different people and just leave our own community. And he goes on to say that that may be the problem, trying to assimilate with the people that don't even like us, y'all. Check this out.
Allow me to drop a thought. Black parents must come to realize that they may be part of the problem when their kids lose sight of their own cultural heritage and race. Some black parents love the idea of their black kid being the only black kid in a white group. They somehow believe that it's progress and indications of great success when they can claim mostly white friends. There is an inherent danger when our kids grow up with this illusion of inclusion. Now take, for instance, the Nolan Wells case. It should be a warning shot to all black parents. Stop patting yourself on the back just because you've escaped your own people. At some point, you will realize that all you might have one day are your own people. We have been taught and programmed to not think well of our own race. Therefore, we associate everything good with being white. Now, without any chastisement of the Wells parents, I truly believe that they will search their own souls and parenting styles in regard to their tragic loss. Isolation is isolation. We could not afford to allow our children to isolate themselves in groups that lack other members of their own race. Example.
So the part I want to expound on is when our people get money or whatever, and we feel like we got to disassociate ourselves from our own people. I don't think Nolan Wells' parents did that. I believe Nolan Wells was happy when he was around his own people, like when we see in the TikTok videos. We don't see any TikTok videos of Nolan Wells dancing, doing TikToks, happy and smiling when he's with those white boys. I don't see it, but I don't believe that Miss Christine Wansley and Elmore left the black community just to be around the white community. I feel as though Nolan was associating himself with people that will not accept him. They would never accept him. And I think it would have been best that he stayed around his people.
We got a governor who comes out immediately during a murder investigation and says, we see no foul play. Some people thought that was suspicious, but it turns out that the governor is actually friends with one of the persons who is suspected of being involved, parents. What does a personal connection, or when does a personal connection become a legal conflict in your opinion?
Right here, right now, we have all the makings of a cover-up.
Boom. Now that, you know what? Now, we are making progress because I stood there the whole time and I said, this is what it is. But you were reluctant to say that. You were extremely reluctant to say that. And I'm gonna tell you, man, for you to come around and hear that evidence, to see how things are stacking up, for you to actually change your position. Most people will not change their position. They'll stand on that hill. They don't give a damn what evidence is presented. They're gonna stand on that hill. For you to hear this new findings and to be able to say, they're in trouble, it says a lot about your character.
Thank you. I've always tried to call balls and strikes, right? I've always tried to be objective from a legal standpoint. I always say that again and again, right? This is a problem. This is a problem out the gate. You are on the money. Okay. The fact of the matter is, too many politicians, too many elected officials are tied way too close to too many potential, if not outright, suspects. That's what you have here. That's as clear as day. Now, what that means, people are going to have different opinions, but the conflict is glaring. This is problematic on a lot of levels for the state, for the county, for these individuals, and the longer they stay voluntarily tied to this investigation, the worse it is for them, because they are held to a greater public scrutiny. They're held to higher burdens that we can really dive into their pasts.
There you have it, y'all. We got an attorney who was once on the other side, but then he was man enough to come out after all this stuff we starting to see on the internet. Cito call, these little young men up there lying on podcasts. He like, nah, something fishy. Let me go and come out and let them know I ain't on that side no more. That's a man, somebody who admits when they were in the wrong. But like he said, there are way too many people that are connected with this, people of power. So if one go down, it's gonna be a lot of people to go down, because you're gonna have some snitches up in there too. How did you figure this out? Who assisted you with this? Oh, it was, we'll reduce your time. We'll let you get out. Oh yeah, it was my mom, and then she called some people, and then those people called some people, and then them people called some people. And next thing you know, that's the bombshell right there, y'all. But y'all get in the comment section. Y'all let me know what y'all think about that snippet of the tight-knit group. Remember, they always come out and say, yeah, we was tight-knit. We don't go nowhere without each other. So we see them on that boat, tight-knit. Ain't nobody saying shit. That is wild. Y'all make sure y'all hype this video. Make sure you continue to press the like button, and make sure you subscribe to the channel. Big Kish signing out. I'm going, y'all.
Somewhere on the water off the coast of Mississippi, on the afternoon of July 4th, a boat radios for help. A dispatcher asks a simple question: is everybody on board? And a voice says yes. Everybody's on, except an 18-year-old named Nolan Wells was not on that boat. He was still on Horn Island. 2 days later, his body would be pulled from the water near the same shoreline he was last seen alive on. And in the weeks since, one detail has refused to resolve itself, no matter how many press conferences, how many GPS logs, how many independent autopsies get thrown at it. Two people who were both standing there for the last real conversation Nolan Wells ever had cannot agree, even now, on which direction he said he was walking. Before we go further, a quick note. Every video we've done on this case has pulled in more viewers than has pulled in subscribers, which tells us a lot of you are watching without sticking around for what comes next. If this case matters to you, if you want the next update the moment it drops instead of finding it 3 days late in your recommended feed, that's what subscribing actually does. It costs you nothing, and it means you're first. All right, let's get into it. This is the story of Nolan Xavier Wells. Not the version that gets simplified into a headline. Not the version built on a photo nobody bothered to date, or a video nobody bothered to identify before it went viral. The version built on what's actually been said on a record by name, and what still weeks later does not add up. Before Nolan Wells was a case number, he was a kid who cooked his mother's salmon the night before a holiday. That detail matters more than it sounds like it should. Christine Wansley has told that story more than once, in more than one interview, and it never loses its weight. The night before July 4th, before the trip to Horn Island, before any of what followed, Nolan stood in his mother's kitchen and made her dinner. Salmon, not a big production. Just a son who liked to cook. In a house he was about to leave for the holiday, doing something small for the woman who raised him. He hugged her, told her he loved her, and walked out the door. Nolan was 18, a graduate of Ocean Springs High School, a wide receiver who had just started his career at Southwest Mississippi Community College. chasing a future in football that his family says he took seriously, the kind of seriousness that shows up in small ways, in the discipline of a training schedule, in a body he was building for a purpose. Friends describe him as big-hearted, energetic, the kind of person who never met a stranger, who could walk into a group he didn't know and be part of it inside of 10 minutes. His mother calls him a special soul, someone whose entire instinct was to make the people around him feel included rather than left out. That instinct is worth sitting with, because it's part of what makes a day he disappeared so hard to make sense of. This was not a withdrawn kid, not someone who drifted to the edges of a group and got lost in the noise. By every account from the people who knew him, Nolan was the one who pulled other people in. On the morning of July 4th, 2026, Nolan traveled to Horn Island with a group of friends, a barrier island off the Mississippi Gulf Coast, roughly 10 miles from Ocean Springs, reachable only by private boat. No buildings, no self-service across most of it, no lifeguards, no medical facilities, nothing but sand, water, and whoever else decided to show up that day. On a holiday weekend, that meant hundreds of people, music, boats anchored along the shoreline, the kind of gathering that's been a tradition along that stretch of coast for years. Nolan was last seen by his group of friends sometime around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Blue swim trunks, no shirt, sunglasses, according to the account his friends have given. He had spent part of the afternoon talking to a young woman he'd met that day. According to that same account, when the group's boat developed mechanical trouble and had to head back to the mainland early, Nolan chose to stay behind, planning to catch a ride back later with someone else. He never made it home. Here's what the public record actually establishes, stripped of speculation, and the order happened. Nolan's group left the dock that morning at roughly 9:56 a.m. and arrived at Horn Island at 11:14. According to GPS data later obtained by CBS News, through a records request to the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources. For several hours, by every account, the day looked like an ordinary holiday. Swimming, drinking, music, a crowd stretched along the island's northwest tip. Around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Nolan's friends say he was last seen near that stretch of shoreline, talking with a young woman later identified publicly as Katie. Sometime after that, accounts vary on the exact minute, the boat Nolan's group had arrived on began taking on water. A bilge pump had reportedly failed. The group made the decision to head back to the mainland early, and according to the account given by Warren Hudson's mother, a chancery judge named Ashley Cole, that departure happened around 4:30 p.m. At 4:31 p.m., GPS data confirms the boat left Horn Island. It returned to its original dock, then traveled into Fort Bayou around 5:52, back to the dock by 6:06, out again to a boat launch at 7:19, and from there overland, presumably towed by a vehicle, to the boat owner's residence in Biloxi. That is a confirmed machine log movement of the vessel connected to Nolan's friend group on the afternoon and evening of July 4th. Sometime around 11 that night, one of Nolan's friends contacted the Coast Guard. Nolan's mother, Christine, contacted the Jackson County Sheriff's Office not long after. Once it became clear her son hadn't come home and wasn't answering his phone, a phone that, as it turned out, wasn't with him at all. It was still on the boat, left behind with a pile of other phones on the dash. The way teenagers heading into open water on a hot day sometimes leave their devices to keep them dry. A search began the next day. The Coast Guard, the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, the National Park Service, and eventually the United Cajun Navy, a volunteer search and rescue group with a long history of showing up for exactly this kind of case. For 2 days, they searched the water and the shoreline around Horn Island. On July 6th, a National Park Service ranger found Nolan's body in the water off the island's northwestern tip, close to where he'd last been seen 2 days earlier. Formal identification didn't come through a visual confirmation from a family member. It came through dental records. That detail alone tells you something about the condition in which he was found, even without anyone spelling it out further than that. Jackson County Sheriff John Ledbetter's office made its first public statement not long after. There's no information that we have right now that would lead us to believe that a crime has occurred, the sheriff told reporters. Coroner Bruce Lynn said there were no immediate signs of physical injury. For a lot of people watching this case unfold, that sentence, delivered within days of a body being pulled from the water, is a moment everything else about this case started to feel rushed. Sheriff Ledbetter's office has since said its language has changed as the investigation has developed. In a more recent update, the sheriff confirmed his department has been conducting formal witness interviews and that his office has been in direct contact with outside agencies, including the FBI. Tips from the public, he said, have moved this case forward in a real way. This past week, he told reporters, we got a lot of valuable information that has come from the public. This investigation is active. It's ongoing. Compare that to the sentence that first lit this story on fire online. No reason to believe a crime has occurred, and the shift is hard to miss. It doesn't mean the department has reversed itself, and it doesn't mean the FBI has taken over case. Local sheriff's departments bring in federal partners for all kinds of reasons that fall well short of full takeover, a search that crosses jurisdictional lines, forensic resources a small county office simply doesn't have, or just an additional set of trained eyes on a case that's grown far bigger than a rural sheriff's office is built to handle alone, especially with an independent autopsy running in a different state and a family's attorney who has already brought a former NFL player in to help pay for it. What that shift does tell you, at minimum, is that a small county sheriff's office has expanded this investigation well past what it can manage entirely on its own, and that bringing an outside contact is a reasonable, largely unremarkable response to that reality, not necessarily proof of something more sinister uncovered behind the scenes. There's a reason investigators interview witnesses separately instead of as a group, and it matters here specifically. When people know what their friends have already told police, their own memory can start bending toward that shared version without anyone consciously lying. It's not deception in most cases. It's simply how memory works under pressure inside a group after something traumatic, especially when that group has spent weeks fielding the same questions from reporters, from strangers online, and from each other. Interviewing everyone separately is the only reliable way to see where a group story holds together and where it quietly falls apart, detail by detail, without everyone in the room hearing everyone else's answers first. It's slow, unglamorous work. It doesn't produce a headline on its own, but it's exactly the kind of work that eventually surfaces a detail like the one Javon Williams gave the Biloxi Sun-Herald. We're about 10 minutes in, and if you're finding this channel through this case for the first time, welcome. We've been covering Nolan's story from the beginning, and we're not going anywhere until there's an answer. If that's the kind of coverage you want more of, hit subscribe now, because we're about to get into the part of this case that almost nobody has laid out clearly in one place, the actual contradiction at the center of everything. Here is where the story stops being simple. According to the account Nolan's friends have given, to reporters in interviews, and reportedly to investigators, Nolan chose to stay behind on Horn Island. He wanted to keep talking to a girl he'd met that day. He planned to catch a later ride back to the mainland. That is a story that has anchored nearly every piece of coverage on this case since the beginning. But there is another account, and it comes from the one person who was actually having that final conversation with Nolan. Her name is Katie, until attorney Ben Crump raised it publicly, and until her own family confirmed it, almost nobody covering this case outside of Nolan's own inner circle had said that name out loud. Katie has not given a direct, on-camera interview to any outlet, as far as the public record shows. What exists instead is an account relayed by her sister, Gracie McCormick, who posted publicly on Facebook to lay out what her sister remembers from that afternoon. According to that post, Nolan's friends have been pressuring him to wrap up his conversation with Katie so he could get on a boat with them. Katie spoke with Nolan, and based on that conversation, she assumed he was heading back toward the boat he'd originally arrived on, not staying behind. She made it home safely that day on a completely different boat, picked up by other family members. The post also states that Katie assumed the friends telling Nolan to get on the boat wouldn't have left without him, and that her family has already given, in their words, all the answers they can give to both Nolan's mother and to investigators. Sit with that for a second, because this is the part that gets lost in the noise. Two people, both physically present for the last conversation Nolan Wells ever had before he disappeared. And 2 weeks later, they still don't agree on which direction he said he was walking. That's not a legal technicality buried in an affidavit somewhere. That's the kind of detail 5 people standing around a barbecue usually remember the same way without even trying. And here, it still hasn't lined up. Now, it's worth being precise about what we actually have and don't have here, because getting this wrong in either direction does a disservice to everyone involved, including Katie herself. What we have is a second-hand account, Katie's version, filtered through her sister, posted on social media, not a sworn statement, not a direct on-record interview. That matters. A Facebook post from a family member is filtered through grief, through the instinct to protect someone who has already been dragged into a national story she never asked to be part of. It is a real account from a real source, and it deserves to be taken seriously. But it is not the same thing as Katie speaking for herself under oath and treating it as though it would be its own kind of misinformation. What strengthens it, though, is something separate entirely. Javon Williams, described by Nolan's own family and friends as his best friend, and who was also on Horn Island that day, gave an on-the-record interview to the Biloxi Sun-Herald. He said he last saw Nolan sometime after 4 in the afternoon, hanging out with a girl and other friends, and that both Nolan and the girl had left their phones behind on the boat Nolan originally arrived on. He also told CNN something that cuts directly against a version the friend group has told publicly. In his words, "I've never known Nolan to stay back while his friends leave. He's always been a guy where if he rode with you, he's going to come back with you. That's always how he's been every single time." That's not a rumor. That's a named source on the record in 2 separate outlets, describing a lifelong pattern of behavior. Not speculating about what happened, but stating plainly that the version of events being told publicly doesn't match the person he's known for years. Put those 2 accounts side by side, and you get a best friend saying this isn't who Nolan was, and a young woman's family saying he told her he was headed back to the boat. Neither one on its own proves what happened to Nolan Wells. But together, they raise the exact question his own father raised from the very beginning of this case. Why would this be the one day nobody broke the only rule his parents ever asked of him? If you go with the group, you stay with the group. There's more sitting underneath that contradiction, too, and none of it resolves cleanly on its own. Police reports listed Wells as wearing black shorts the day he disappeared. His mother says photos from that day, shared with her by a young woman who was on the island, show him in blue swim trunks. It sounds small. It might genuinely be nothing. People misremember clothing all the time, especially describing someone secondhand, hours or days after fact. But it's exactly the kind of small, specific detail that shouldn't require a grieving mother to go hunting down photographs herself in order to catch it. His family also says they had a strange, uncomfortable experience trying to get his car keys back. Keys had been left in a driveway belonging to one of his friends. Not handed over. Not dropped off with the family directly. Left in a driveway. The same way his phone ended up needing to be tracked down using a location app rather than simply returned by the friends who'd had it. Every item that should have come back to this family automatically, his keys, his phone, a clear account of his last hours, has instead had to be tracked down or dug up by the family on their own. And then there's the phone itself. Once Christine had it in hand, she says she found something that didn't sit right. Nolan updated his Snapchat constantly, the way most 18-year-olds do, several times a day without a second thought. But there was no activity at all in the 24 hours before he disappeared. Total silence from an account that was never silent. The location data attached to the account, according to the family, didn't match where the phone was later physically found. That mismatch alone doesn't prove anything was tampered with. Phone location data drifts and lags all the time, especially near open water with spotty cell coverage. But paired with an account that suddenly stopped posting the exact day its owner went missing, it's the kind of detail that deserves a real explanation instead of shrug. It's also worth pausing on how this discrepancy actually reached the public, because the path matters. Ben Crump raised a contradiction himself at a press conference alongside Reverend Al Sharpton, standing next to Nolan's parents. "The glaring contradictions just jump out at you," he said. "You have where a young woman he was talking to says that, well, Nolan said he was going back to get on the boat with the boys. The boys say that Nolan told them he was going to stay and talk to the young woman. It's a contradiction. They're not saying the same thing. One of them is telling the truth. One of them is not." Reverend Sharpton, for his part, said plainly that what the family had been told simply doesn't make sense, and that the lack of confidence in how local authorities initially handled the case only deepened when they learned this young man had reportedly been in some kind of argument that was caught on tape, a detail that, as we've already covered, turned out to be a case of mistaken identity once Trayston Shepard came forward. Crump also pointed to Nolan's phone as part of the same puzzle. What teenager, he asked, leaves their phone behind if they're planning to stay on an island? It's a fair question, and also an incomplete one, since multiple friends have separately told reporters that leaving phones on the boat's dash was standard practice for the entire group that day, to keep them away from salt water. Both things can be true. It can be normal for a group of friends to leave their phones on a boat, and it can still be the specific detail that makes a grieving family's stomach turn when they're the ones trying to reconstruct their son's last hours from the outside. None of these details, taken individually, proves that anything happened to Nolan beyond a tragic accident. Clothing gets misremembered. Keys get left behind after a long day in the sun and a few too many drinks. Phones get handed off in a panic and forgotten. Any one of these, on its own, is exactly the kind of loose end you'd expect from a chaotic, unsupervised holiday on a crowded island. But all of it together, the shorts, the keys, the phone, the Snapchat silence, and at the center of it, two people who were both there for Nolan's final conversation telling two different stories about which direction he walked, is a lot of small, specific things a family has had to dig up on their own, one piece at a time, instead of being handed a clear account by the people who were actually standing there. If this is the first time you're hearing Katie's name in connection with this case, you're not behind. Most channels covering this story still haven't said it. That's exactly the gap we exist to close. Type the word anchor in the comments if you caught why that detail matters more than almost anything else in this case. The fact that two people at the same conversation remember it two different ways. We're reading every one of them, and it helps us know how deep to go on the next update. And if you haven't already, now's a good time to subscribe, because this case is not slowing down. Before we go any further, we have to talk about two pieces of viral evidence that dominated this case for days, because both of them turned out to be wrong. And understanding exactly how they fell apart tells you something important about how this entire story has been covered. The first is a photo. It surfaced alongside a Facebook post from an account Nolan's mother later confirmed she had never spoken to and never met. The claim in that post was dramatic, that Nolan had actually returned from Horn Island alive, attended a pool party in Jackson County, gotten into an altercation, was beaten, and that his body was taken back to the water afterward. A photo circulated alongside it, uploaded to Instagram by an account with fewer than 1,000 followers, deleted shortly after, appearing to show Nolan in a pool surrounded by a group of people. Within hours, it had reached hundreds of thousands of viewers. Attorney Ben Crump reposted the image to his own account. For a huge portion of the internet, that repost became the moment the theory turned into accepted fact. But Crump's caption, which most people scrolled straight past, said something very different for what people took away from it. He wrote that he didn't know whether the claims were fact or rumor, and that his team was following all clues until the truth was found. Nolan's mother addressed it publicly as well. She had never spoken to the person behind the original post, never met them. The certainty didn't come from the family or their attorney. It came from an audience working entirely off a photo nobody had actually dated. That question, when was the photo actually taken, had an answer, and Rolling Stone found it. Alongside photo metadata obtained independently, they published their findings on July 13th. The photo was taken on June 27th, 8 days before the 4th of July, not after Horn Island. 8 days before Nolan ever boarded that boat. The party had taken place in Pass Christian, Mississippi, and the person who confirmed the date and identified everyone in the photo, including Nolan, was Trayston Shepard, a close friend of Nolan's, part of the same friend group, who hadn't even attended that particular party but knew who was in it. According to Shepard, the image wasn't posted as evidence of anything. It went up on July 5th as part of a casual photo dump, a batch of recent memories shared online, the kind almost anyone posts without thinking twice. Uploaded on July 5th and taken on July 5th are two very different things, and that distinction is the entire foundation of viral theory was built on top of. Shepard's response to the theory that grew out of that photo was blunt. He called it unbelievable. He called it heartbreaking. The second piece of viral evidence was a video, shot from a boat near Horn Island, capturing a heated exchange between voices, one of them allegedly demanding a phone back. Crump described it at ABC News as Nolan and somebody yelling at one another on the boat, and said he believed the voice belonged to Nolan. On Good Morning America, he related directly to the country. You can hear an argument going where Nolan is saying, "Give me my freaking phone. What are you freaking doing?" The person actually in that video eventually spoke for himself. It was Trayston Shepard again, the same friend who'd identified the pool photo's real date. He told ABC News plainly, "That's the video I'm referring to, and that's me yelling." He wasn't in a dispute with Nolan at all. He'd been in a separate altercation with a stranger, and two friends were physically restraining him at the time. According to ABC News, Shepard gave an official statement to the Jackson County Sheriff's Department confirming this on the record. Not internet commentary, an actual statement to investigators. Two pieces of evidence, both introduced after Nolan's death, both eventually walked back, one by the reporting that dated the photo, one by the very person whose voice was actually on the recording. Ben Crump himself acknowledged the shift publicly, saying his team had been told one thing by one witness and reported it out. Then another witness came forward saying otherwise, and that going forward his team will be more careful to frame things as what a specific witness said rather than as confirmed fact. Why does any of this matter if both of these leads turn out to be dead ends? Because it tells you something the rest of this case desperately needs you to understand. Confirmed, disputed, and unknown are not interchangeable categories. And this case has had all three swirling together in the same comment sections for weeks. The pool photo is confirmed false, dated to a different day entirely. The yelling voice is confirmed to belong to someone else, on the record, to two separate outlets. And the contradiction between Katie's account and the friend group's account remains exactly what it's always been. Disputed, not settled, not resolved by either side walking anything back. Still open. Set the photo and the video aside entirely. Put them down. What's left, underneath both of those now collapsed threads, is the same unresolved gap that started this whole story. Nolan Wells was last seen on Horn Island around 3 in the afternoon. His body was pulled from the water 2 days later, identified through dental records rather than a visual confirmation. Hours passed between his body being found and the public being told it was him. And his own mother was not the one who made that identification. We're roughly 20 minutes into this one. And I want to be straight with you. This channel grows almost entirely because people like you decide a case deserves more attention than it's getting from the bigger outlets. If you made it this far, you're clearly one of those people. So do us a favor and subscribe before you keep watching, because we got 2 more major threads to get through, and you don't want to lose your place. There's a piece of dispatch audio at the center of this case that's worth slowing all the way down for, because it's one of the only pieces of hard evidence in this entire story that doesn't rely on anyone's memory. We're sinking. Can y'all please come? A voice calling for a tow. And is everybody on board and in good health otherwise? A dispatcher's question, the kind asked as standard procedure any time a call like this comes in. And the answer, yeah, everybody's on. According to reporting from NBC News and the New York Post, that boat likely had around 7 people aboard and was having trouble at roughly 4 o'clock that afternoon out near the west tip of Horn Island. A bilge pump failure, a boat operator asking to get unstuck and towed back. The GPS data from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources shows that boat left the island at 4:31 p.m. Here's the honest, unresolved question sitting underneath that call. We don't know for certain whether Nolan was physically on that boat at the exact moment those words were said, or whether he had already been left on the island by then. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office has confirmed Nolan did not return on that boat. So somewhere in the window between that call and 4:31, when GPS shows the boat actually departing, Nolan was no longer with the group. What happened in that specific window, not the whole afternoon, just that narrow slice of it, is one of the central open questions of this entire case. And then there's the phone. Nolan's phone never left the island the way he did. It left on the boat without him. His family used a Life 360 tracking app to locate it after he was reported missing and found it at the home of one of his friends. When Christine and her sister went through it, focusing on Snapchat, they found 2 accounts wiped clean. No saved pictures, no snaps from July 4th, even though the family checked before the platform's standard 24-hour expiration window had passed. Christine has said that's deeply out of character. Anyone who knew Nolan will tell you he was constantly taking pictures and video at gatherings, the kind of person who'd walk up to his own mother before bed just to get one more photo. For weeks, the phone sat with the family's independent legal team rather than with law enforcement, and that fact alone generated a wave of suspicion online. But the actual sequence of events is more complicated than a simple refusal to cooperate. On July 15th, following a meeting between the family and Jackson County District Attorney Angel Myers McElrath, both sides publicly agreed to a mutual inspection of the phone, meaning the family forensic experts and the state's investigators will examine the device together at the same time, seeing the same data pulled the same way. Attorney Eric Hertz, leading the family's independent investigation alongside former law enforcement experts, confirmed that arrangement directly. As of the most recent public reporting, both sides have agreed to that joint inspection, though the exact scheduling and completion of it has continued to be a moving target throughout this case's coverage. Why does a joint inspection detail matter so much? Because of chain of custody. If the state extracts the data alone and later says certain content was deleted and unrecoverable, the family has no independent way to verify that. If the family's experts extract alone, the state can raise the exact same objection in reverse. A simultaneous, mutual extraction, both sides watching the same screen at the same moment, is one of the only ways to make sure the eventual findings from that phone can actually hold up whichever direction they point. It's worth stopping here and talking honestly about why those 2 viral pieces of evidence spread the way they did, because the pattern behind it isn't unique to this case, and understanding it protects you the next time a case like this one comes along. Multiple established outlets have reported on just how much false information filled the silence while this case's official record moved slowly. When a case involves this much public attention and this little confirmed detail coming from official channels, the gap between what people want to know and what's actually been verified becomes the exact space where fabricated claims spread fastest. And this case has had more than its share of that. If you see a claim online right now insisting the autopsy results are already out, especially one describing some dramatic new finding, treat it with real skepticism until it's confirmed by a named source you can actually check. That gap between an emotional public and a slow, careful process is exactly where misinformation thrives. And every rumor that eventually turns out false doesn't just waste attention in the moment. It makes the real findings, whenever they land, harder for people to trust. It's gotten uglier than just false photos and misidentified voices. 2. Ben Crump has confirmed that people connected to this case, including friends who cooperated with investigators, like Trayston Shepard, have received actual death threats since Nolan's body was found. Shepard himself has said as much directly. He and others in the friend group have been targeted since coming forward, which is part of why he declined to appear on camera even while giving detailed, on-record statements to reporters and to the sheriff's department. Crump has also confirmed that AI-generated videos falsely depicting Christine wantonly have circulated online. Fabricated footage of a grieving mother, built and spread for engagement, while she is simultaneously trying to plan her son's funeral. Whatever position anyone holds on the underlying facts of this case, that specific cruelty deserves to be named for what it is. Crump's message on it has been consistent. Nobody's life should be threatened in the pursuit of the truth, and nobody should be presumed guilty before actual evidence exists, a standard that has to apply to every name connected to this story, on every side of it, or it doesn't mean anything at all. Quick pause here, because I want to know something specific from you. Type the word timeline in the comments if you think the 431 departure window is the single most important detail in this entire case. More than the photo, more than the video, more than anything else we've covered so far. I read these, and it genuinely shapes which thread we dig into next. And if you're not subscribed yet at this point in the video, I'm not sure what else we have to say to convince you, but the button's right there. Let's talk about where this case actually stands legally, because there's a lot of noise online about what different developments mean, and most of it overstates what's actually been confirmed. Following their meeting with the district attorney, Ben Crump confirmed that Jackson County will present this case to a grand jury once the sheriff's office concludes its investigation. That is a real confirmed development, and it's a meaningful one, but it's worth being precise about what it does and doesn't mean. A grand jury referral is not the same thing as criminal charges being filed. It means a panel of citizens will eventually review the evidence gathered and decide whether there's enough to justify an indictment. According to reporting from Law and Crime, a grand jury referral for an unnatural or suspicious death is actually standard procedure in Jackson County. The district attorney's office has stated publicly that authorities have not indicated this is currently being treated as a criminal investigation. That doesn't mean nothing will come of it. It means the process itself at this stage isn't confirmation of a specific outcome in either direction. Civil rights attorney Tyler Bailey, speaking of Law and Crime, laid out what a grand jury could actually be looking at if this does move forward, and it's a wider net than most people assume. It doesn't have to mean a homicide charge. It could involve tampering with evidence, obstruction, accessory after the fact, anything connected to how the aftermath of Nolan's disappearance was handled, independent of how he actually died. That distinction matters, because it means even if the ultimate cause of death is never conclusively proven to be anything other than an accident, there could still be legal consequences tied to what happened after. The missing phone content, the delayed reporting, the inconsistencies in the accounts given. Then there's a question everyone keeps circling back to and still doesn't have an answer for. How did Nolan actually die? The state of Mississippi conducted an autopsy shortly after Nolan's body was identified. As of the most recent public updates, full results, including toxicology, have not been released. Toxicology testing routinely takes weeks, regardless of how much public attention a case receives, and Mississippi State Lab does not fast-track cases based on media coverage. Separately, the family arranged an independent autopsy, performed by pathologists in Washington, D.C. with no ties to Mississippi, funded in part by Colin Kaepernick. Those results have also faced delays. Crump has pointed to logistical issues transporting Nolan's body, rather than anything related to the findings themselves, though that explanation has understandably done little to ease the family's frustration given how much time has passed. 2 separate autopsies, conducted by 2 separate teams, with 2 separate sets of findings still pending. If those 2 reports come back describing fundamentally different pictures of what happened in Nolan Wells, that divergence alone becomes one of the most significant developments this case has produced. If they align, it closes off one of the most persistent sources of public suspicion. Either way, until both are actually released, everything built on top of that uncertainty, every theory, every online argument, every confident claim about what really happened, is standing on an incomplete foundation. There's another thread here that's easy to miss underneath the bigger headlines, and it goes directly to how strained the relationship between this family and local law enforcement has actually been. Under Mississippi law, a crime victim's family is entitled to receive an incident report within 72 hours. That window came and went. By the time Christine and Elmore sat down with the district attorney, they still didn't have it. Christine has said publicly that the last time anyone from the sheriff's department had directly contacted her before that meeting was the previous Tuesday. And even that contact was a single text message, one she sent herself, simply asking for an update on her own son's death investigation. More than a week into an active investigation, that was the entire extent of direct communication from the lead agency handling her son's case. Part of what came out of the meeting with the DA's office was an acknowledgement of that gap. The district attorney's office has since said it would take over as a primary point of contact going forward, with a dedicated victim advocate assigned specifically to the family. That's a real concrete change. It's also worth sitting with the fact that it took a public press conference, a national attorney, and weeks of silence before that basic level of communication was put in place at all. Civil rights attorney Tyler Bailey, speaking with Law and Crimes' Jesse Weber, puts some of this in sharper context. Asked how significant it was that the DA met directly with the family and their legal team, Bailey didn't hedge. That's not common, he said, not in situations like this one. He pointed to the sequence itself as a real story. A sheriff's office that initially said there was no reason to suspect foul play, followed by a family demanding an independent investigation, followed by a joint meeting and a joint agreement to inspect evidence together. That sequence, Bailey said, reflects genuine pressure from public attention changing how this office is choosing to operate. Not proof of wrongdoing on anyone's part, but clear signal that the version of this case the public was first given wasn't the final word. It's worth taking a moment here to explain why a case like this one, a body recovered from open water, no visible signs of trauma reported at the scene, can still take this long to produce even a preliminary cause of death, because that delay is one of the most misunderstood parts of this entire story. When a body has been in the water for an extended period, a straightforward external examination often can't rule things in or out the way people assume it can. Water itself can obscure or wash away exactly the kind of evidence, bruising, ligature marks, defensive wounds, that would otherwise point clearly toward one explanation or another. That's part of why toxicology matters so much here. A full toxicology screen doesn't just look for illegal substances. It can help establish whether alcohol or other compounds were present at levels that would affect someone's ability to swim, to stay conscious, or to call for help, which matters enormously in distinguishing an accidental drowning from something that involved another person's actions. It can also help establish a more precise window for time of death, which in turn helps investigators figure out whether Nolan was still alive during that unexplained gap between roughly 3 o'clock and the boat's confirmed 4:31 departure, or whether whatever happened to him had already occurred by then. None of that work can be rushed without risking a result that later collapses under scrutiny, which is part of why both the state's toxicology results and the family's independent examination have taken weeks rather than days, even under this much public pressure. There's a term that gets used carefully in law enforcement circles, and it's worth introducing here because it applies directly to how witness statements in this case need to be read. The danger of a shared narrative. When people who were together during a traumatic or chaotic event know what their friends have already told police, their own memory can start bending toward that shared version without anyone consciously deciding to lie. That's part of why investigators conduct interviews separately rather than as a group. It's the only reliable way to see where a group story holds together and where it quietly falls apart, detail by detail, without everyone in the room hearing everyone else's answers first. It's slow, unglamorous work. It doesn't produce a headline on its own, but it's exactly the kind of work that eventually surfaces a detail like Javon Williams' account, or the gap between Katie's version and the friend group's version, sitting there unresolved. There's also a real answer to the question of what happens if a grand jury does eventually convene and chooses not to indict, or if the DA decides not to present the case to one at all. Grand jury proceedings are secretive by design. There's no media coverage of the actual proceedings. Defense attorneys aren't present. Ben Crump, representing the family, won't be in the room either. It will be a prosecutor presenting the case to a panel of citizens, and prosecutors retain what's called prosecutorial discretion, meaning even a joint agreement to eventually present evidence to a grand jury doesn't legally obligate the DA's office to pursue charges afterward or even convene the grand jury on a fixed timeline. Bailey's read on that dynamic was direct. If this office ultimately declines to pursue charges, there will be lasting questions about whether the grand jury was given a complete picture of the evidence or a narrower one shaped to reach a particular outcome. That's not an accusation that it will happen here. It's a description of exactly why so many people are watching the specific process as closely as they are, and why the family's insistence on transparency, the joint phone inspection, the repeated public meetings, the refusal to simply wait quietly, matters as much procedurally as it does emotionally. While all of this is played out, the press conferences, the disputed video, the disputed photo, the phone that still needs a joint inspection, Nolan's family has also had to do something no family should have to manage in parallel with demanding an investigation. Plan a funeral for an 18-year-old in public, with the entire country watching. Services were held at Centerpoint Church in Ocean Springs, with visitation in the morning followed immediately by the service. Reverend Al Sharpton officiated, at the family's request. Filmmaker Tyler Perry covered the full cost of the funeral. Colin Kaepernick helped fund the independent autopsy. A celebration of life followed at the Jackson County Fairgrounds. And Christine has been clear about why she wanted it framed that way rather than as a traditional, somber repast. Nolan, she said, would not want everyone sitting around crying in silence. He'd want a party. So that's what she gave him. Open to former teammates, coaches, classmates from every level he ever played at, and notably, open to media as well. That last detail is worth sitting with for a moment. A mother who still didn't have her son's official cause of death chose to let cameras into his funeral anyway, because she has said more than once that the moment the world stops watching is the moment this case risks losing whatever momentum has forced answers out of local officials so far. That instinct to keep the story public rather than let it retreat into private grief has defined this family's approach from day one. It's also, honestly, part why this case has generated as much noise as it has. Attorney Eric Hertz has said the family's independent tip line has been receiving somewhere between 50 and 100 calls a day from people who were on Horn Island that day or who know people who were. Some of those callers, according to Hertz, aren't talking to local law enforcement at all. They're calling the family's team specifically. His stated goal isn't to keep that information contained within the family's own investigation, but to get those witnesses connected with official investigators directly, so that whatever they know doesn't simply evaporate because someone was too hesitant to walk into a sheriff's office. Whether that volume of tips ultimately produces anything that changes the picture of what happened to Nolan is still an open question. But it tells you something about how far this case has traveled beyond a single county's jurisdiction and how many people, total strangers to this family, have decided this is a story worth calling it about. We're deep into this one now, and I appreciate everyone still with us. That tells us something about how much this case actually matters to the people watching it, even when the bigger networks have already moved on to the next headline. If that's you, if you're the kind of person who wants the full, careful version instead of the version built for a 30-second clip, subscribing is the single easiest way to make sure you don't miss the next piece of this. We're not going anywhere until this family has an answer. Let's be disciplined about where this actually leaves us, because that discipline is exactly what this case has needed from the beginning. Here is what's confirmed. Nolan Wells traveled to Horn Island on July 4th with a group of friends, and was last seen by them around 3 that afternoon. His body was recovered on July 6th and identified through dental records. GPS data confirms his friend's boat left the island at 4:31 p.m. and made several additional stops before reaching its final dock that evening. A towing call was placed reporting the boat taking on water, with a dispatcher confirming everyone aboard was accounted for, though whether Nolan was still with the group at that exact moment remains unclear. Nolan's phone was left behind on that boat, later recovered by his family using a location tracking app, and found to have no Snapchat activity in the 24 hours before he disappeared. A widely circulated pool photo has been conclusively dated to 8 days before Horn Island. A widely circulated video of an argument has been confirmed, on the record, to feature a different person's voice, not Nolan's. The district attorney has confirmed this case will be presented to a grand jury once the sheriff's investigation concludes. Both sides have agreed to a joint forensic inspection of Nolan's phone. Here is what's disputed: whether Nolan told Katie he was heading back to the boat, as her family's account states, or whether he told his friends he was choosing to stay behind, as their account states. Whether the clothing described in the police report, black shorts, matches the blue swim Trunks' family says photos from that day actually show him wearing. Whether the missing Snapchat content and location data mismatch on his phone indicate anything beyond ordinary technical inconsistency. And here's what remains simply unknown: the official cause and manner of Nolan Wells' death, pending both the state autopsy's toxicology results and the family's independent autopsy. What specifically happened in the roughly 90 minutes between Nolan being last seen and his friend's boat completing its documented movements that evening. Whether any criminal charges will ultimately result from a grand jury process that hasn't yet begun. Whether Katie will ever give a direct, on-record account in her own words rather than one relayed to her family. And if she does, whether it confirms or complicates a version her sister has already made public. It's worth restating plainly one more time what this list is not. It is not a claim that Katie did anything wrong. It is not a claim that Nolan's friends are lying collectively or individually. It is not a claim that a crime occurred at all. Two people can each give an honest, good faith account of a chaotic, crowded, alcohol-involved afternoon on a barrier island and still end up remembering it differently. Memory is not a recording device, and grief and public pressure both have a way of hardening a person's recollection into something more certain sounding than it originally was. What this list is instead is a record of exactly where the confirmed facts stop and the disputes begin, drawn as precisely as the public record allows, so that nobody watching this video walks away thinking they know more than what's actually been established. That's the honest shape of this case as it stands right now. Not a verdict, not an accusation aimed at any single named individual. A list of facts, a list of open disputes between real people who were actually there, and a list of questions nobody, not the sheriff's office, not the district attorney, not the family's independent investigators, has been able to close yet. Underneath every timestamp, every GPS log, every dispute account of who said what to whom on a crowded beach, there is still a mother who cooked salmon with her son the night before he left, and who has not stopped fighting for an answer since. Christine Wansley has said, in more than one interview, that grief doesn't move in a straight line, that some moments she can talk about her son's stories and laugh, and the next moment she can barely breathe. She's also said more than once that if Nolan were here, he'd tell her the same thing he always did. Keep talking to people, keep telling my story. That's what she's chosen to do. Press conference after press conference, subpoena after subpoena, even while planning the kind of service no parent should ever have to plan. There's a version of this story where all of it, the GPS logs, the towing audio, the joint phone inspection, the grand jury referral, the debunked photo, the misidentified voice, Katie's dispute account, Javon Williams' on-record statement, eventually resolves into something clean, a single, agreed-upon explanation that a jury or a family or the public can actually rest on. It's also possible this case ends the way too many cases like it do, with an official finding that satisfies the legal standard for closing a file without ever fully satisfying the people who loved Nolan most. Either outcome is still ahead of us, not behind us. That's the discomfort at the center of covering a case like this one, honestly. You don't get to manufacture the ending. You only get to lay out as clearly and as fairly as the record allows exactly how far the truth has traveled so far, and exactly how far it still has to go. Nolan Xavier Wells was 18 years old, a wide receiver with a real future in front of him, a young man his own mother describes as someone who never met a stranger, who made the people around him feel seen. He was supposed to come home that 4th of July. Nobody watching this case, not the people who followed it from day one, not the people just finding it now, gets to decide what actually happened to him. A jury eventually might. Right now, all any of us have is a record, laid out honestly, with the gaps left exactly where they are instead of papered over with certainty nobody's earned yet. If this video gave you the version of this story you haven't been able to find anywhere else, that's exactly what we set out to do. And the best way to help us keep doing it is simple. Subscribe and turn on notifications, because when the autopsy results land, when the grand jury moves, when Katie's account is either confirmed or contradicted by something new, we will be back with the update. And we'd rather you hear it from us first. One more thing before you go. Type the word anchor one more time if you're planning to be here for that update, because we genuinely track it, and it tells us how many of you are actually invested in seeing this case through to the end rather than just passing through once. Nolan Wells deserves that. So does his family. Until next time, we'll see you in the next one.